What's up? Yo, alright, look. I wanted it to be a live stream, but as you might imagine, the internet has AIDS here, and so it's just going to be a premiere. So let's get into it because we saw a lot of fascinating things. Got to see a lot of history. Got to see some stuff I wish I hadn't seen. Had some rough times. So it was, I could say, genuinely a pilgrimage because I suppose a pilgrimage has a bit of an ascetic component to it. It's not a vacation. It's not a vacay, right? You got to undergo some struggle for it to be spiritually beneficial. But we saw a tremendous amount of relics, tremendous amount of sites. It wasn't all religious. We saw some historical locations, places. Got to see a lot of blessed migrants. We got to see a lot of nice things. I got to get into almost a fight with a portly Italian dude. He was going off on me. Got yelled at by I guess he was a socialist. I don't know, bookstore owner for no reason. I just have one of those faces that ladies love and other men hate, I guess. Just envy, just riled up for no reason. But it was an adventure. So let's get into it because I want to tie in a lot of history. I gave 2 talks while I was there. One to the audience, you guys, for subscribers over on Rockfin. And if you're interested, you can go over and I thought I had it linked, but I'll show you that link here in a minute. Pull it up for you. The first talk I did a few nights into being there, I think maybe on the tour, that is, maybe the 4th or 5th night of the actual tour. No, maybe it was the 2nd or 3rd night of the actual tour. I don't know. But I also gave an esoteric-ish talk that it all tied in. You know what I mean? It all tied into where we were, sinister sites and locations. So this first one you can go watch on Rockfin here. It's called Rome, the Beast, Nero, the Cult of Isis, and Geopolitics. And that one is a members-only talk that I did about the 4th or 5th day that we were first there in Rome. Now, this was not the talk on the tour because we got there early. We spent a couple, maybe 4 or 5 days with my buddy who lives there. And he kind of gave us his own private tour since he's been living there for many years as a teacher. Married an Italian girl. And then I gave a talk to the members of the tour, which is... It's also for members to the website as well. The talk here, Gregorian Reforms, Filioque, and the Eastern-Western Schism. And I had a lot of good sources there because I had a lot of plane reading time. So I got pretty deep into the Meyendorff Papadakis book, which was an excellent source. The first 100 pages or so of this book are really, really good. Everybody should read this. If you want to go deeper than the Michael Welton book, we've talked about that book for many years. Michael Welton's 2 Paths. It's a great introduction to the question of the papacy. I got throat AIDS, by the way, or what some call the flu. You got COVID? Did you get COVID? Because everything is COVID now, right? AIDS doesn't exist. Flu doesn't exist. It's all COVID. No, I got essentially the flu, which made the last week of the pilgrimage basically hell. I mean, I was in Dante's frozen popsicle level of hell, which is the bottom, if you don't know, down there with the devil. And it was awful. So we were blessed. Someone brought the gift of flu. We were blessed with that. And I got it the worst of everybody. So I was punished, Jay, for the whole trip. Flagellating myself. Or the flu virus was flagellating me. Anyway, This talk is, I think, pretty good overall in the sense that it really ties in everything that this pilgrimage / tour was interested in. Because we were there seeing pre-schism Italy, Orthodox Italy. All the sites and relics that we saw were, of course, pre-schism Orthodox sites. But we also ended up, unbeknownst to me, in fact, the very one day that I was reading, and the last thing that I underlined, I kid you not, I talked about it in this talk, was about Pope Gregory VII, because, of course, he plays a key role in the Gregorian reforms, which is the first 75 pages of the Meyendorff Papadakis book, right? And lo and behold, that day, the last thing I had underlined was about Gregory VII. That very day, we were entering a chapel somewhere. I don't even remember where, because it all runs together after 3 weeks of it. Lo and behold, I walk up on Gregory VII's body. I kid you not. I'll try to pull this picture up and show you here in a minute, because I have a million pictures, so I got to try to sift through the pictures and pull out the ones that are actually worth showing you, because I pretty much look like a haggard demon bum, right? Hobo demon the whole time. Because I ended up having the same clothes because there wasn't a lot of places to wash your clothes. So yeah, Italy is a trip, put it that way. It's an adventure. It's basically a choose your own adventure, and you die at the first page. At least that's what happened to me. So I was also not dressed appropriately, and we ended up meeting nobility. Believe it or not, we ended up meeting Italian princesses, absolutely, literally, and I was dressed like a damn hobo. Now, you might think, well, how are you going to meet nobility dressed like a hobo? Hey, that's just the kind of situations I always end up in, right? And there wasn't really any way around it. I had basically espresso stains all down my front because I spilled espresso everywhere on my one coat. So I looked like some kind of modern art performance piece walking about, incarnated Picasso, more like espresso. So I look like a dang slob meeting Italian princesses from a 1,000-year dynasty going back to the Middle Ages. We'll look at that in a minute. But anyway, go listen to these talks because they're very relevant to the history. And I'm going to tie in the history as we get through some of these images. So, when I first got there, I saw this and I was like, is that Nero? I'm like, dude, I'm going to get a selfie with Nero. Now, that was not Nero, actually. It's an unmarked statue, which is really, I think it's just Julius, right? So just Julius Caesar there. Julius came out and greeted us as soon as we got there. But we got to move on because there's a million pictures. So I gotta figure out how to make this work. So, originally we just kind of walked around. The first thing I noticed was all the graffiti. I mean, it looks like dang, Compton up in here, right? You think, oh, Rome's gonna be like this, palaces and ancient ruins everywhere, and there's ruins and everything, but it's all covered in graffiti. So it's kind of like Tijuana up in there. And then you see the obelisks everywhere. So the first thing I noticed was everywhere we went, giant obelisks. And these were various periods when the Romans were able to bring back the booty and the hauls that they had gotten hold of, right? So you'll notice here, and there's no other way to do this, so I apologize. It's just going to have to be like this. So this is one of the halls here. Obelisks. And a lot of these came originally from Egypt. And of course there is the famous obelisk in St. Peter's Square, which has the title written on it, Christus Victor. So the reason they did this is that once Christianity ended up having the victory in Rome, they took the pagan idols and the pagan Rome, and they basically stuck a cross up on top of it. And that's interesting because a lot of people, a lot of dumb kind of evangelicals will point to this stuff and be like, oh, look how pagan it is. Oh, it's so pagan. Well, I mean, it is and it isn't, because there's a lot of pagan Rome that's evident when you're walking around Rome. And it's sort of like layers, right? Like layers of a excavation, because pagan Rome is sort of the first layer, and you will see a lot of it there. It's still there. And then here you'll see one of the first emperors of Rome. It's like over it is overlaid the Christian Rome, right? Which is sort of the next phase of Rome. Now, this is a famous cafe. This is the first or second day. This is the Cafe Greco, Cafe Antico Greco, Cafe Ancient Greek. And Jamie was like, oh, did Plato go here? I'm like, Jamie, come on. Plato didn't go here. This cafe was not here 2,500 years ago. It's just called that because it's a 300-year-old cafe where, you know, like people like Nietzsche hung out. So here you see me, the new Ubermensch over there with my dainties and pastries. It's kind of hard to feel like the Ubermensch if you're ordering dainties and pastries, and yet here we are. Now, remember, in my talk on pagan Nero Rome and all that, I went much deeper than we're going here, but it is cool to be in the cafe where Nietzsche was. Now, this is interesting because this is the Pantheon, and we walked about 5, maybe even 10 miles this day to get over to the Pantheon. And this is kind of when things started getting annoying, because it listed it as open. And when we got all the way over there, they were like, sorry, you're not too late. You're too late to do anything. We hate you, by the way. You suck. Also, screw you. I mean, literally, it started getting, like, bad. Like, people started getting on my nerves. The Italians, because they're very fussy. Everything is an offense to them. They get offended by everything. If you don't say the right thing, it's just, it's annoying. So we walked 5 or 10 miles-ish that day. Pretty tiring, but I was all right. This is the second day that we got there. And the Pantheon, and this is the ancient pagan Pantheon built, I think, around 50 AD, on an older structure, if I recall. And it was dedicated to all the gods. And then, when it became Christianized, it was really just dedicated to all saints. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you start to realize that it's a very superstitious place, is what I'm trying to say. And certainly, this picture doesn't really do it justice, because this structure is gigantic. I mean, it's a massive structure. And then there's another fountain where, I forget the name. Everybody knows this fountain, but it's like the big, this thing that everybody goes to. And it's a giant Neptune. And it's interesting, but Neptune was everywhere in Rome. I would have thought maybe there'd be more Jupiters, but it seems like I saw Neptune more than anybody. And maybe that's because of the desire to dominate the seas. Maybe the Romans thought if they placated Neptune, they would have more success. I don't know. But then when we got over to the first most interesting thing was, beyond all the pagan stuff, was the first papal cathedral. Now, this is the Orthodox papal cathedral, St. John Lateran. And this was one of my favorite things at the beginning. This was really cool. Now, this is the frontispiece here. The frontispiece here is, I think, from the 1700s or Renaissance era, or somewhere in there. Excuse me, it's a neoclassical, not Renaissance, but it's not the original, church from 300 AD. But this church, the Basilica of St. John Lateran, is the original bishopric of the seat of the Bishop of Rome. So the Orthodox papacy resided here. It's a really awesome church inside. You can see here sort of the back looking all the way up to the altar and the bishop's throne up there, the ancient Bishop of Rome's throne, and it is right here. Now, when we hear Lateran, we think of the Lateran Council, right? And most famously, you can think of Lateran 649, and that's the council where St. Maximus, the confessor, went and met with Pope St. Martin to condemn monothelitism, and successfully he did. And this is great because it's one of the key arguments against the papalist perspective, the Vatican I view, because this council condemned, it was called by the Pope, condemned monothelitism in 649. And yet monothelitism wasn't ecumenically condemned, universally condemned, until the Sixth Ecumenical Council in 681, Constantinople III. So if we were in a papal scenario, all we would have needed was the condemnation of Pope Martin of monothelitism, which occurred in this place here, right there, the Lateran Basilica. But of course, it didn't work that way because the church was not structured in a papal way in the first 1,000 years, as we all know in the Orthodox Church. Hopefully, everybody knows that by now. So, Lateran 649, of course, is a great argument against the papacy. And keep in mind, further illustrating that point, Lateran 649 is not counted as a Roman Catholic Ecumenical Council. And yet, if the Vatican I papal view were correct, it would be an ecumenical council. And yet it is not. Again, proving that the first 1,000 years papacy was not operating on a Vatican I view. Another interesting element that I noticed walking through a lot of these of the ancient Roman churches was that at the very front of even this church, you'll notice, who do you see there? Equal to one another up at the front of the Lateran Basilica. Why, that's St. Peter and St. Paul. In the Orthodox view, as you guys know, Peter and Paul are typically in the icon both holding the Church of Rome together because they both are the martyrs and founders of the Church of Rome. And so even in St. John's Basilica, the ancient papal church of the bishopric of the Roman Patriarch, you'll notice that Peter and Paul are seated up at the front, right? As if they are equals. I just found that even in the architecture, it is that way. And I think there's even some of this at the Vatican too, right? Where Peter and Paul are up there. So even up into the Bernini, Vatican construction period, there was still the notion of Rome being the church of Peter and Paul. And yet when we come to Vatican I, what does Vatican I say? It says that you cannot say that the preeminence of Rome is due to Peter and Paul. You must say that it is due to Peter alone. Also interesting was throughout a lot of the churches right away, I noticed statues and monuments to Leo the 13th. I think is this Leo? So even in the Lateran Basilica, there's a giant Leo the 13th there. And of course, Leo is famous because of the encyclical condemning Freemasonry, right? And yet, what do we have in the post-Vatican II church? Why we have a essentially Freemasonic doctrine run rampant. And yet, as you're walking throughout so many chapels in Rome, in fact, we just sort of cathedrals and chapels. We randomly walked into one chapel, and they had giant things set up dedicated to people who had converted against Freemasonry. I kid you not. Just a random chapel that we walked into. So there's this weird sort of almost internal struggle, I guess you could say, even in the city of Rome, that you notice in the churches. There's still this grasping for tradition at the same time as the being forced into really the Pachamama, Novus Ordo, Vatican II style, stuff going on, right? So you think that Rome is going to look like this is my joke that I put up, where like you think Rome is going to look like this, right? And then when you get there, it looks like this. Right? It's like, you know, this is an alley in Rome right here, right? It's like that. And I know I've heard, you know, oh well, they really like graffiti. Graffiti's an ancient Roman word. That's what they do. Well, but they also have calendars to hot priests. So here's you could get a hot priest calendar. Let's see if I can make this work. Is that gonna play? I don't think it's gonna play. But on the bottom there, that cracked me up because it's like, oh, you're walking around the street and it's like hot priests. Talk about faking gray. Like what? Yes, I'm not kidding. So next we went over to Villa Borghese, and this is a large park, and there was a lot of interesting artwork and sort of symbolic structures there. I noticed this curious goat-headed Baphomet bench sort of out in the middle of nowhere. And a lot of this stuff is not that old. It's, you know, 300-400 years old stuff. So, you know, we're not talking like 500 years old, but interesting nonetheless. To Orthodox Italy. All right, so I think that's most of what I wanted to get to. I want to remind you guys too that we've got good news. Guess what's out? It's here. It's here, y'all. It's here. Chalk Chad mode is actually here. I just opened this up. Look at that. Look at that raw purple stuff. It is tart. It has an amazing collection of ingredients. We've got high doses of B vitamins. We've got blue magic, which is their central component here in this concoction, which is organic blue spirulina. We've got organic coffee berry. We've got Lipovantage. We've got all kinds of stuff that, I mean, beta alanine, I mean, all the stuff that you need for a pre-workout. And Chad mode is available right now over at chalk.com. I want to encourage you to head on over to our show sponsor, chalk.com. I wish I'd had my chalk with me in Italy because I was sick, right? But if you head on over to chalk right now, you'll notice that what they've got on the front page is the performance stack. Remember, chalk has stacks for men, stacks for women. This is the performance stack, which includes the Chad mode that I was just talking about. Unlock the best of our ultra clean Chad mode pre-workout with the Tonkat Elite and the Action 2.0 together with this pre-workout Chad mode. I highly recommend it. Jamie and I have been going to the gym for the last month and a half. We love it. And I just got my Chad mode in the mail as soon as I got back. It's the first thing I tried out. It actually tastes really good. Head on over to chalk.com. Use the promo code J50 to get 50% off this Chad maxed stuff. We're Chad maxing over here. I mean, we're literally Chad maxing. You can Chad max with me. It's even got the Chad mode dude on it. Look, there he is. It is not a joke. People said, is this a joke? It is not a joke. It's what you need. Head on over to chalk.com. Use the promo code J50. That's J50. That's JAY50 to get 50% off. 50%. And if you use the other promo code J53Life, that's JAY53LIFE, you'll get 53% off those excellent products. There's stacks for men. There's stacks for women. Testosterone boosting, hormone health, mood and focus, energy, detoxing, inflammation response, superfoods like the chocolate, the cacao. It's all over at chalk.com, our beloved sponsor, Awesome Bay's Red Pill Company. Again, use the promo code J53LIFE for recurring subscriptions to get 53% off every recurring subscription, or J50, JAY50 to get 50% off your new test out. If you want to test it out, you can over at chalk.com. Remind you to go over to Rockfin to hear the supplementary discussions, the talks that I did, getting deep into history, deep into theology, the Gregorian reforms in the Filioque, pulling from the Mayandor Papadakis book, and as you know, the talk that I did on pagan Rome, Nero, the beast, and the occult, and the cult of Isis, which I got into in terms of the history of Rome. Not a lot of people talk about the history of the Isis cult, but it had a big influence in Rome in terms of the Vestal Virgins, and we actually walked down to the Vestal Virgins area where they were next to the Colosseum. So head on over to Rockfin and subscribe there. Get access to the stuff there if you're not on Rockfin. Of course, all the stuff that's on Rockfin is also available to the website subscribers. You can subscribe to me absolutely at any time on the website. There's advantages either way. By the way, the full Sammy the Bull interview just went up. You can see it right there, part 1 and part 2. That's the one that we originally did where we got deep into JFK, CIA, all kinds of cool stuff related to that. Oh, I forgot to mention too, Knights of Malta, as we said, in the modern period, really are, as we probably know, one of these sort of CIA things. This is why we see Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, both being Knights of Malta, which is kind of ridiculous. Other heads of state. And if you want a deeper dive into that with the Knights of Malta, and our buddy Mark Hackard went deep into this in one of the interviews that he did with our buddy Tim Kelly. So, Malta Masonry and the CIA. You can go and read this translation that Mark did. I'll put that into the show description. It's right here at Espionage History Archive, Malta Masonry and the CIA. This is a KGB translation. Boris Yeltsin was made a Knight of Malta, which again shows that he was part of the Western CIA operations going on there. And that also has to do with occultism in high places, which Mark goes into in this interview. So if you're looking for it on YouTube, I think it's on YouTube. If you just type in Knights of Malta CIA Mark Hackard, it will come up right here at this website. You can go watch it right there. So that's a full interview that he did. I want to remind you guys too to head on over to Rockfin, and don't just subscribe to me, also subscribe to our sister podcast, Richard Grove's Grand Theft World, where Richard goes into deep geopolitical analyses of the shadow government, of the news, of the recent issues going on globally. You can not beat geopolitical analysis that goes that deep without, you just can't beat Richard Grove. Richard's one of the best, and if you can, head on over to Rockfin and subscribe to Richard right there. Also, be sure to head on over to my website, jaysanalysis.com. And if you're looking for my stuff, for those that ask all the time, the things in the shop are right there. Head on over to the shop. Everything that you get from the shop here is signed. So all of my books and all of Jamie's books are signed copies. Everybody asks that. Yes, absolutely. You can subscribe to the website right here by purchasing a membership for $4.95 a month or $60 a year, either way. So there's those options for subscribing to the archives at the website. And we got some big interviews coming up, so look out for those. Going to be doing some cool geopolitical stuff. I did get most of the way through Dune Messiah. A lot of deep geopolitical conspiracy stuff in Dune Messiah, much like the first Dune, which we've covered in depth. However, Dune Messiah is a very different story. It's a lot more about intrigue and courtly conspiracy, and not as much adventure as there is in the first Dune. So it's a much more sophisticated, much more of a Game of Thrones kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to doing a deep dive into Dune Messiah. We'll tie it into real-world geopolitics and predictive programming as well. There was one other thing I wanted to remind you. Oh, book orders. I know a lot of people have been worried. Where's my book? Where's my book? As I said, we would be gone for 3 weeks for this trip. We're back. Some of the books were on back order, so they will be coming. Don't worry. I know it's a struggle. I know you want my stuff so bad. I appreciate it. But if you just be a little bit more patient, it will get there in another maybe 2 weeks before I will be able to fulfill all the orders. So just be patient. You will get your book. I promise you. Nobody has been forgotten. So you don't have to, cancel it or whatever. All right, be sure and hit like and share, and I will be back soon with more live streams. Now, I might have to do more of these pre-records because the internet is acting janky here And so the technicians are coming to work on it again because I'm having the problem of the uploads speed dropping. So it goes to 0, and then it goes to 5, it goes to 0, it goes to 5. So in order to live stream, you need a consistent upload speed. So hopefully we can get that fixed. But even if not fixed in the next few days, I will be back at the other place and be able to live stream from the classic library. Everybody have a good night. All right. Now, as we're walking through the Villa Borghese, we saw some interesting artwork that I thought was particularly symbolic. Now, there was a cottage that was the home of Canonica, Pietro Canonica, who was this sculptor and artist from I don't know, a couple hundred years ago. And he lived at the Villa Borghese Park, apparently. And they had modern artwork, which I found fascinating, which is this mosaic, I guess. And this is Romulus and Remus with Remus, I guess, is one of them boys on the right, the left, I don't know. But I thought they were supposed to be brothers, so it's a little confusing there. But turns out Wolf Mama, the theory is that the Wolf Mama of Romulus and Remus was confusion because there's a similar term for a hoe and a wolf. So Romulus and Remus weren't werewolf boys. They just had a loose mama, if you know what I mean. But I thought that modern artwork was some was a little off on that modern artwork. I also thought we would see a lot more esoteric stuff in Rome proper, which we didn't. Now it was more like certain places had particularly esoteric symbolic artwork in the architecture. And we'll talk about which ones those were. But the Vatican and, of course, obviously the older Orthodox Papal Cathedral of John Lateran, I didn't notice anything esoteric there, even though it had been updated with, 1700s era renovations. I didn't notice much esoteric stuff really at the Vatican, which I expected more of that from Bernini. I did actually stumble upon Bernini's grave at Santa Maria Maggiore. Let's see what this picture is. I think this is getting over into the Vatican, maybe. Yeah, so when we ended up, the first thing you see when you come into the Vatican is the Pieta, right? And everybody's familiar with the Pieta. Probably the most famous piece of art in the world, probably-ish, somewhere maybe. And that is me as the most important thing in front of the scrawlings in the stone behind me. So the beautiful thing is up front there in the foreground, and that's my face there, the face of an E-Diva. And then that's the Pieta in the background. One thing you do notice is the contrast between the Roman Catholic artwork and imagery, the sacred art, and the Orthodox older imagery of mosaics and iconography. And one thing that's very apparent that our buddy Pat pointed out is that the Roman Catholic statuary and artwork always emphasizes emotions, right? The emotions of the Pieta and the emotions of Mary, the emotions of the saints in their ecstasy, and then sometimes in their sextasy, I'm not joking, contrasted with the dispassionate, deified state of the Orthodox saints, which is still present in a lot of these churches, interestingly. The Vatican was amazing just from an artistic perspective. Of course, everybody has seen the giant, altar piece there. That it's just massive. And we were able to, do some litanies and prayers in front of the relics of St. Peter there. So let's see if there's anything else that really... There was Pope St. Gregory the Great, was also there, but you couldn't really get over to where he was. I think it was under construction, so you could just kind of stand in front of it. But let's see, what is this picture? This is one of the apostles. But you'll notice how everything is extremely emotional, and that's very different from Orthodox iconography, because we're not typically attempting to make the emphasis on emotion. And it's not that the emotions are bad, it's just that the emotions can be a source of prelust, and we can mistake emotions and feelings for God. Not that our feelings shouldn't be directed towards God, but they can't be replaced or mistaken for God. And I am still sick, by the way. I got throat AIDS. Just kidding. I got the flu. Now, when you go under into the crypt at St. Peter's, what you do see that's interesting is tombs, particularly of recent popes. And here is John Paul I, and even our tour guide admitted that people think he was assassinated. So this was really a nod to all of the P2 Gladio stuff that I've been talking about, because of course that was the source, most people think, for the assassination of John Paul I, who was Pope for, I think, 33 days. And some people think also that the KGB Patriarch Nicodem was also intended to be poisoned that day, but for whatever reason he didn't drink the coffee. And then that was covered up, people think, because essentially this was a CIA Kissinger kind of operation, because a lot of money was being funneled through the Vatican Bank to fund Black Ops. And so, even our tour guide was basically admitting that John Paul I was pretty much assassinated. And I also found it odd to get, pictures in front of the infamous Paul VI grave. And you'll notice the modern artwork in the background there, because a lot of the ugly stuff that you begin to see in the Vatican and at St. Peter's is under principally Paul VI. That ugly Paul VI audience hall, right? That was Paul VI. Now, hopefully let's see if I can get this to play, because people won't believe that the very day that we arrived in St. Peter's Square in front of the Vatican, there were giant screens up, kid you not, look at this, in front of Peter and Paul, because there's giant statues of Peter and Paul, see that there? And they were playing these clowns, I kid you not, now it's not a clown mass, but clown troops with rainbow kites on their outfits. Let's see if this will play. I don't guess it's going to play. This is actually a video clip, but I thought maybe it would play if I stuck it in here. I don't think it's going to play though, but I'll show you, you can see on it if I zoom in. This is the Paul VI Audience Hall broadcast, where they were waiting for Pope Francis to show up, and there's clowns doing clown shows with balloons wearing rainbow kites for the kids. Kid you not. There you go. And these are on giant screens in front of the apostles. I mean, there's other screens all over, but here's, as I said, here's the screen in front of. So displacing Peter and Paul are giant screens in front of the Vatican. Look at that. And then this video, I recorded 1 minute of it. I mean, it's just amazing providence that the day that we show up, they've got giant screens with Skittles clowns doing clown shows. Amazing. So then next we moved on past the Vatican to the Vatican Museum, which was kind of breathtaking because it's just infinite. You're essentially, it's like a dream. You're walking through room after room after room at the Vatican Museum of just infinite pieces of artwork. And it's kind of, the tour that you take is kind of arranged chronologically. So you're actually in ancient Rome and you're seeing ancient, statuary. I don't remember but here's Bacchus. So all the pagan gods are what you see first. I thought it was interesting that Bacchus is out there. And then I think you see, this is maybe Athena. It's either Diana or Athena. And this is kind of when you first get to the Vatican Museum. Now remember, this is huge, right? So this is the old Papal Palace is now the Vatican Museum. So it's this gigantic palace, and that's the thing where you see the walls, right? Where Francis is like, oh, you need open borders, but he's got walls all around his giant art collection at the Vatican Museum. This is Nero's bathtub. Pretty sure that's right. So here's where Nero took a bath. And then, this is in the Vatican Museum, right? And then you see all of these giant statuary everywhere of all the gods. So basically, this is a room where all the gods surround you as you take a bath. I thought that was fascinating. Here is a down looking up image of, I think, Minerva. Or maybe Diana. Or maybe Helen. I can't remember, but there's so many deities. And they kind of push you through there. Like, it's going so fast. You don't have time to, like, stop and study it because they're like, oh, go. And I'm not joking when I say that it's like infinite rooms that just keep going on and on and on. Literally for hours, you're walking through this nonstop. And it's kind of disorienting. And you're walking nonstop. It just keeps going and going and going and going and going. And you're seeing all these statues. Now, this was interesting. This was Constantine's mom's, St. Helena's sarcophagus, if I understand correctly, in the Vatican Museum. There's also an entire giant Egyptian section that we didn't even go into. And this is the former, remember, Papal Palace. That is where you see, this is the Borgia apartment. So when you're watching the Borgias with Jeremy Irons, and they're engaged in all their skullduggery, and he's got his tunnel over to the Hoe House, and when he's trying to mac on Julia Farnese and all those different women and whatever, this is it. So Pope Alexander VI was getting laid in this room right here where we was walking around. So this is the papal get laid room right there. Not joking. We actually kind of got lost. Now here's the crazy part: getting lost in this building. This is it, by the way. This is Vatican Museum / Old Vatican Palace, right? You could totally get lost in this place. You wander around for a day and never know where you are or what's going on. It's let's see, what is this? Yeah, this is the another angle of the Borgia apartment where they was getting up to they naughty works up in there. The most infamous of the popes, Alexander VI. And then we accidentally wandered over into this part on the way trying to find the bathroom. And I stumbled into it, and it's remember, it's arranged chronologically. So before you get to the Sistine Chapel, which is overrated in my view, you encounter all of this ecumenist, modernist, ugly stuff. So they intentionally like foist you over to ecumenist. Look, oh, we've healed the schism with the Orthodox. Look, see that? And it turns into hideous, gross, virtually almost satanic modern art like this, right? As you're wandering through up to the modern period. So the last thing that you see before you go into the Sistine Chapel in all these sections is this modernist area, which is just hideous. I mean, look at this. And they're, hallowing this like this is still great art, which is just bizarre. I mean, look at this Mary. I mean, it's just hideous. Hideous. So here's what it has turned into, right? Just deformed, hideous, abstract. I mean, look at this. What the heck is that? It looks like a rack of ribs, right? A stained glass window of a rack of ribs. And they don't even look like good ribs. They look like ribs, screwed up ribs from the carnival. That's going to give you a bubble gut, right? You don't want that. So, anyway. And then next we traveled on boat to a fascinating location, Amalfi, which was one of the neatest places that we went the entire time. These are images on the way to Amalfi. This is a seaside village that, as one of our tour members noted, kind of reminds you of Dagon. I know Dagon is a Spanish village, but like you get over into the tour bus can't go here, so you got to go here by boat, right? And you're riding over here, and you're like, this is pretty remote. You know what I mean? Like this is, if ever there were a Dagon committed village, it might be something such as this. I'm referring to the movie Dagon from 2000 or whatever, which we have reviewed. H.P. Lovecraft. And this is, if I recall, St. Andrew's Cathedral. So you get to see the relics of St. Andrew.